Hello everyone and welcome to today's free webinar, What are CAATTs and Why Should Auditors Care? Brought to you by AuditNet.org, the global resource for auditors. We're glad you can join us. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm president and founder of AuditNet.org and your webinar moderator. We're fortunate to have with us today Charlie Walker, the author of The Ultimate Guide to Auditing with Excel and the creator of Top CAATTs, an Excel-based CAATTs package. CAATTs are tools specifically designed to help auditors. They're extremely useful and the benefits are well known, yet there are still many audit departments not using them. A key lesson, auditors are wasting hundreds of hours a year while exposing themselves to unnecessary risk by failing to take advantage of the technology available to them. The good news is that data analytics and CAATTs software have never been more readily available or easier to use. In fact, you probably already have some basic CAATTs software installed on your computers. This webinar will introduce data analytics and CAATTs and give you a hand getting started so you can start achieving the benefits they bring in your audits. I would now like to turn the floor over to our guest presenter, Charlie Walker, creator of Top CAATTs. Charlie?
Well, thank you, Jim. It's great to be here and it's a pleasure to be invited to talk to you all today about CAATTs and data analytics. Just so you know what's coming up, first of all, I'm going to talk about what CAATTs are and why they're important for auditors. I'm going to talk about how you can get started with CAATTs today by downloading a free copy of my book which walks you through 101 audit tests using software you've already got. I'm going to talk about taking CAATTs to the next level and the various dedicated CAATTs packages available, including a quick demonstration of one of these. And as Jim mentioned earlier, at the end there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. But first, I'd just like to give you a quick introduction to me, who I am and what my background is. I joined KPMG and began my training to become a chartered accountant in 2004. I worked in one of the largest departments in the UK and had a wide variety of clients ranging from owner-managed businesses right up to listed companies. Although the majority of my projects were financial statement audits, I had the opportunity to spend some time in other departments, and I have experience in internal audit type work, transaction services, and carrying out Sarbanes-Oxley audits. Now, I've always had an interest in computing, but I've never studied it, and I'm by no means a computer expert. And before joining KPMG, I'd not really used Excel much before, just for things like graphs and charts. But I quickly started picking up some Excel tips from some of my colleagues and realized that Excel could make my life a whole lot easier. And this really was my introduction to data analytics and CAATTs. And although what I was doing back then was pretty basic, it really did make a difference. In fact, the day I learned how to use just one Excel formula, it changed my audit life forever. And that formula was VLOOKUP. This formula had an impact for two reasons. Firstly, it's incredibly useful and it really helped me out in a lot of situations. But secondly, and more importantly, it inspired me to learn more. And so over the next few months, I spent a lot of time teaching myself Excel. I was away in hotels a lot, so I spent my evenings on the internet looking at forums and reading tutorials, but it really paid off. Before long, I was able to carry out far more work and in far less time than most of my peers. No one could understand how I was doing all of my work, helping out the rest of the team, and still getting out of the door at 5 o'clock each day. But then one day I hit a problem, and I needed to use VLOOKUPs, but I couldn't. The reports were too big, and my old laptop kept crashing with so many VLOOKUP formulas. Now, in search of a solution, I came across VBA, which is an Excel programming language, and this prompted me to write my first bit of code, and it helped me solve my problem. But it opened up a whole new world of possibilities, as I could now write routines and run them over and over again. I didn't have to keep typing out my formulas, and I didn't have to manually create the pivot tables, and in many situations I made my auditing click button simple. It also meant that I could start sharing some of my skills with colleagues. They could then use my programs to carry out the testing without needing to know how to write the formulas or the VBA code. Now, it was about this time that KPMG rolled out a CAATTs package and they sent us all on a 3-day training course. Now, the problem was the software was pretty complicated and it wasn't very intuitive. As a result, many people found it difficult to get to grips with, And even after 3 days, there were a lot of blank faces in the training room. And the training just wasn't adequate for most users. And I sat there thinking, well, I'm already doing most of this in Excel. Why do I need to learn some new software? And then over the next couple of months, it became obvious that people did find it too complicated and they weren't using it. Out of our department of 80, there were just 2 or 3 people who were using it regularly. Even I tried to use it, but I quickly found myself going back to my old Excel ways, as I just found things quicker and easier in Excel. And I realised there were now more people in the department who were using my VBA scripts than this super high-tech software that KPMG had just spent a small fortune on. And when the managers realised this, I was asked to run some Excel training workshops, both in my own offices, but in cities nearby as well. And the feedback we had was really good. And it became really clear that people were increasingly turning to Excel and not using the software they'd been provided. And there had to be a better option. What auditors really needed was a CAATTs solution that was far simpler to use and could be used by all auditors with far less training. So in 2008, a little while after I qualified as a chartered accountant, I left KPMG and worked with some professional software developers to create that solution. And in October 2008, we launched version 1 of CAATTs, and then earlier this year, we released version 2, which was updated with about 30 new tools and some updates to some of the existing ones. Now, also last year, I wrote a book called The Ultimate Guide to Auditing with Excel, and in a little while, I'll let you know how you can get hold of a free copy. Okay, that's enough about me. What are CAATTs? Well, it's an acronym, and different people use slightly different words. Computer-aided audit tools, computer-assisted audit tools, computer-aided audit techniques, they all mean the same thing. It's using your computer to help you carry out your audit work. So what's the difference between CAATTs and other audit software? Well, actually, CAATTs mean using any computer software to help you, but it's more commonly used to refer to data analytics software, which is also known as generalized audit software. Now, other software that auditors might use includes work paper management, document storage, engagement workflow, trial balance, word processing and presentation software. And whilst all these software packages are incredibly useful and they have certainly made life easier for auditors, they don't actually help with the fundamental role of an auditor, which is carrying out audit testing and obtaining audit evidence to support your conclusions. And this is where data analytics are different. They help with that fundamental task of carrying out the audit testing and obtaining evidence by analysing the underlying records. So, what's the need for CAATTs and why are they important for auditors? Well, over the last few decades, computers have transformed the way that companies operate. 30 years ago, most records were kept manually, most companies were smaller, they were more local, and their transactions were simpler. Now, everything is computerized. Companies have grown, transaction volumes and complexity are ever increasing, and companies are operating on a global scale. But many auditors haven't adapted their approach, and they're using methods from decades ago. Technology has changed so quickly that there are still plenty of audit partners out there who trained before computers were even commonplace, let alone specialized audit software. And unfortunately, these old methods are no longer the most efficient or practical way to obtain audit evidence. And what's more, with the volume of transactions, it may be impossible to gain sufficient coverage and comfort without using data analytics. And this is starting to be reflected in the auditing standards, which now mention CAATTs several times. So for many auditors, there is rapidly becoming a need for CAATTs, but they also bring substantial benefits. First of all, they can lead to significant efficiency savings, with auditors often saving 20 hours or more a month once they move to a CAATTs approach from a manual one. In fact, there are occasions where you can cut days' worth of work down to a few minutes by using just 1 or 2 CAATTs tools. CAATTs can substantially reduce risk. In many cases, they facilitate testing 100% of the population, eliminating the need for sampling and providing 100% coverage and comfort. They also reduce risk by enabling new testing not previously possible, allowing you to gain a deeper understanding into the client records and to look at them in a slightly different way. And this deeper understanding and new testing adds value to your audits, allowing you to provide your clients with better feedback as you're uncovering more in your normal day-to-day audit work. Now, if you're an internal auditor, this can lead to direct cost recovery savings which flow all the way through to the bottom line. If you're an external auditor, this extra feedback can help strengthen client relationships, and in this fiercely competitive world, it can separate you from your competitors. CAATTs open up new opportunities, enabling you to expand the range of services you offer, or allowing internal auditors to look at areas that you've not looked at before. By providing a standardized approach following predefined routines and reducing the amount of manual inputs, CAATTs improve the quality of audit work, reducing errors, reducing risk, and reducing the time spent repeating work and correcting review points. And by automating much of the mundane and repetitive tasks, junior members are able to spend more of their time on challenging and interesting areas, and this can have a substantial impact on staff morale. It also provides staff with new skills, which of course benefits both the individuals and the organisation as a whole. And another benefit often mentioned by CAATTs users is that it allows them to do more with less. And if I recall correctly, in a recent AuditNet survey, 67% said that CAATTs allow them to do more with less. And I think that's quite important in these current times where budgets are tight and people are needing to increase efficiencies and do more with less. Now, just before we carry on, I'd just like to run a quick poll and ask everybody if they're currently using CAATTs or doing any data analysis in their audits. So we should be seeing the question just pop up on your screen now, and we'll give everyone a few seconds to answer that.
We're getting a very good response on our voting here, Charlie. We're at about 87%.
Okay, that's fantastic.
We'll give everybody another 15-20 seconds, see if we can get the maximum amount of people voting.
Okay.
We're now over 90%. Okay, we are going to go ahead and close the poll. We've got 93% that have voted, and I will share the results. Looks like 23% said they use specialist CAATTs software. 42% do some in Excel or Access. 31% said they're looking into it, and 4% no, and they don't plan to. So we have probably around 70% that are either using Excel or they're looking into using some sort of automated approach.
Okay, that's fantastic, and for given the nature of the webinar, that's kind of what I was expecting. This is an introduction to CAATTs sort of webinar, so I think that's really good, and I think certainly those 70% will get a lot out of it. But what I just want to talk about now is given the growing need for CAATTs and the benefits that they bring, is why are there so many audit departments who aren't using CAATTs? Well, there's two reasons for not using CAATTs. Either they've not got access to the software, which I think that makes up that sort of 70%. But I think amongst that 30%, there's quite possibly some who've got the software and they're not using it. Now, for those who've not purchased data analytics software yet, the most common reasons for not purchasing are cost, which I find unusual as there's normally a very strong business case to CAATTs, and the initial investment is usually recovered very quickly, often within just a couple of months. Concerns about training requirements, which is completely understandable, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about training in a minute or two, and management reluctance. Now, I think much of this management reluctance stems from a fear of the software. Not so much with the end users who will actually be using the software. There does seem to be a trend away from it here, which is fantastic. But I think there's still a bit of a fear at a higher level, with management concerned that they're not going to get the benefit from CAATTs or they're going to make the wrong decision. And there is a common myth out there that CAATTs software is extremely complicated to use and there's a high rejection rate amongst end users, which results in the software sitting on the shelf and investment being wasted. Well, this is a myth. Actually, it's a part myth. It used to be true. The first CAATTs products were extremely difficult to use, but things have come a long way since then. Those early products have been updated, and there are now new products on the market like TopCAATTs that have been specifically created with ease of use in mind. So if this is a myth or it no longer needs to be true, then why are there departments out there that have the software and aren't using it? Well, it comes down to two things. The first is not selecting the right software in the first place. The different software packages do have different features, and some are more suited to certain circumstances than others, and you've got a much higher chance of success with CAATTs if you choose a package that's suited to your needs. Now, the other reason that CAATT deployments fail and users reject the software is underestimating the training needs. Every department is different, every software is different, and some of the packages are a bit more complex and do need more training than others. If you don't provide your team with sufficient training, then they won't be able to use the software, and there is little choice but for it to sit on the shelf and not be used. Many audit departments have purchased complex software and they're not provided sufficient training, and KPMG was a classic example where the software they chose probably wasn't the best for the circumstances, although at the time they didn't have a lot of choice. But then the 3-day training course they sent us all on wasn't right for most people. And if you don't get the combination of the right software and the right training, then you're unlikely to be able to get maximum benefit from CAATTs. And if you are looking into CAATTs software, then I would strongly encourage you to keep these two things in mind. Now, what I want to talk about now is the first of these, and introduce you to the different software options that are available to you, so that hopefully I can help you make that right decision and choose the software that's going to be right for your department. Now, as you've probably already worked out by now, you've already got some pretty good CAATTs software installed. Microsoft Excel. Excel is incredibly powerful, and it's one of the most useful pieces of software I ever used as an auditor. The advantages of using Excel are that I'm sure most of you have already got it installed, and you've probably got a good understanding of at least the basics. If you don't, there's a massive amount of information on the internet with plenty of dedicated websites and forums. Remember, my Excel skills are almost completely self-taught. Most modern accounting systems can export to CSV formats, so importing the data is generally quite easy. Actually, Jim, can we just run that second poll now? I'd just like to get an understanding for what people's current Excel skills are, or what level you think your Excel skills are at the moment. So again, you should be seeing that poll pop up on your screen shortly, and we'll give everyone a few seconds to answer it.
Okay, the poll is up there now. We're getting a very, very fast response. We've got 79%, 80%. Let's see if we can get close to 100% that reflect their answers on this. We're over 90% now, and we're about 30%, 30 seconds in. Another 15 seconds and we'll be closing this poll, so if you haven't voted, please cast your vote. Okay, we are at 95%, so we're going to go ahead and we will close the poll and share the results.
Okay.
And it looks like 71% say they have a moderate skill level with Excel, 14% basic, and 15% say they're advanced. So most of the people are in the moderate range.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, that's exactly what I was expecting. Most auditors do use Excel to some extent, and they've got a good understanding of the basics. But most people don't have maybe some more advanced skills, and there's a fewer auditors out there that are using some of the more advanced features within Excel. So the really good news is that for the vast majority of you, and even those that would probably consider your Excel skills as fairly basic, you can probably get started doing some of the stuff in Excel today. And my book, which is 101, The Ultimate Guide to Auditing with Excel, and that walks you through 101 audit tests that you can do in Excel using nothing other than Excel. So you really can get started today, and in a little while I'll let you know how you can download a PDF copy of that. Now, I just want to give you my top Excel tip here, and that is use VLOOKUPs. It is one of the most useful functions in Excel for auditors, and as I mentioned earlier, it transforms the way that I audited. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I would strongly encourage you to read up on it. There are numerous examples of how you can use it in the book, and at the beginning of the book there's a little bit of an introduction as to how to use VLOOKUP as well that you might find useful. Now, although Excel is fantastic for getting started with, it does have its disadvantages. It wasn't designed for this type of work, and so things take longer than they need to, and they usually require several steps. It also requires the use of formulas which can sometimes be complicated, and this introduces opportunities for errors, and it does leave some testing unavailable to all but Excel experts. Excel is limited by the number of records that you can analyze. If you're still using Excel 2003, then you can only analyze 66,000. Although if you're using Excel 2007 or 2010, it's much less of an issue, as you can now handle over 1 million rows, which is more than enough for the vast majority of tasks. And there is also only so much you can do with Excel. It doesn't have all the functionality that most auditors need, and some testing is impossible in Excel or requires extensive VBA programming. Remember, I had to learn VBA to help me when Excel couldn't do what I needed it to. And that means Excel is great for getting started with data analytics, or if you're only carrying out fairly basic tasks, but fairly soon most auditors hit limitations, or they want to do things that just aren't possible. Now, if you're really interested in Excel, and maybe some of that 15% who consider themselves to be experts and maybe have already learned some VBA programming, but you can do a lot more, but it is out of the reach of most people. Now, some auditors will use Access, but although this gets around the Excel file size limitations, it still wasn't designed for this type of analysis, and it has the same drawbacks like several steps, being sometimes quite complicated. You need to understand query constructions, and if you're completely new to Access, it can be even more complicated than trying to do it in Excel with VBA. And so this is where dedicated CAATTs products come in. These are software products that are specifically designed to help auditors with data analytics, and they can be split into two groups: spreadsheet-based products and database-based products. Now, the spreadsheet products run on top of Excel, adding extra functionality, expanding and enhancing on what you can do in just standalone Excel, without you having to write formulas or VBA code. All of that is done for you. And the two most common of these are Active Data and CAATTs, which is the software I created. The other type of software is the database products, and the two most common of these are ACL and IDEA, and I'm sure many of you have heard of these. Now, because the spreadsheet packages run inside the Excel environment that you're already familiar with, they tend to be far easier to use than the database products, as they build on top of existing knowledge rather than starting from scratch with a new piece of software. And when I developed CAATTs, ease of use was the key focus, as I really wanted a solution that could be used by all auditors regardless of their IT skills. And as a result, the spreadsheet packages tend to have lower training requirements than the database ones, and they can be more likely to be used going forwards, because if only because they're in Excel that you've already got open, so they're sat right in front of you every day, and so it's hard not to use them. The spreadsheet packages also tend to be cheaper than the database products, particularly when you factor in those training costs and look at the total cost of ownership. But they're not suitable for everyone. They're limited to the same Excel restrictions, so if you need to analyze large reports, then they might not be appropriate. They're also limited in their ability to write your own scripts and are less flexible with fewer options. But of course, this is one of the things that makes them easier to use and lowers those training requirements. With the spreadsheet products, you also need to get the data into Excel first, and in many cases this makes it easier. Firstly, as you're already familiar with this format, and secondly, the people you're requesting the data from are probably already using Excel and they've already got the reports in an Excel format. But it can sometimes be an issue, particularly with older systems that won't export to formats that Excel can easily open. There are several third-party products on the market that help with importing data into Excel, but the database products have more advanced import functionality and they can import a wider variety of formats. The spreadsheet products also lack true continuous monitoring, which allows you to automatically schedule tests on a regular basis. However, this functionality is rarely of use to external auditors, and internal auditors can easily run the same tests daily, weekly or monthly with the spreadsheet products. They just can't automate it. But the database products do have server versions that you can install on the server, and they allow you to do continuous monitoring and real-time analysis, scheduling, automated testing, and things like that, although sometimes it can be fairly complicated to set up. And so this makes the spreadsheet solutions more suitable for everyday auditors who have a regular need for using data analytics, but it's not the be-all and end-all of everything they do. And for those auditors who are mainly carrying out sort of fairly normal and typical audit procedures and don't need to analyze very large reports. The database products are more suitable for specialist data analysts, IT auditors, for those who need to do complex or custom analysis or want to do continuous monitoring or regularly need to analyze large reports. Now, as I've already mentioned, be careful choosing your software. It is important that you get the right solution for your needs. There's no point in spending more money than necessary on extra functionality and training if you don't need it. And if you choose something that's more complicated than necessary, it might just confuse people anyway. On the other hand, there's no point in a spreadsheet solution if you regularly need to analyze very large reports or do complex analysis, or you want to set up continuous monitoring. But not only do you need to consider the tasks that you want the software to do, you do need to consider the skills within your team, and it feeds into then the training considerations that you're going to make. But everyone has different strengths, and some people are more IT orientated than others. And those people who are less IT orientated or are completely new to this type of software and work may struggle with some of the more complicated packages, and some people may never get to grips with them. And this can make the spreadsheet options a great introduction, and then if your team needs to progress later down the line or they move to another job where they're now analysing larger reports, that foundation that they've learned with a spreadsheet solution, a lot of those skills are transferable up to the database products and lower the learning curve there. Now, if you do have a need for more advanced analysis, or you occasionally need to analyse large reports, but if you've got concerns about some of your users' IT ability, or you're worried about the risk of rejection, then you may want to consider a two-product approach where you provide a couple of people with a database product and train them up to be CAATTs experts, and then you can provide an easier-to-use everyday solution like CAATTs to the rest of the team, so they've still got access to the most common tasks and audit tests. This allows you to retain the full range of data analysis functionality within the team, as if need be people can refer things to the experts, but it has a lower software and training cost and much less risk of rejection, and it's particularly effective in larger audit departments. Okay, I hope that's given you a really good introduction to what CAATTs are and why you maybe want to be looking at using them and the various options that are available to you. What I'd like to do now is give you a quick demonstration so that I can show you some of the types of tasks that you can do with CAATTs. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating using CAATTs, which is the software I created, and I'm going to be using version 2.1, which is the latest version. So some of you may have come across CAATTs in the past. You may notice a few new tools and features as we have updated it fairly recently. So, as I mentioned, it runs completely within Excel. And in Excel 2007 and 2010, CAATTs adds a new ribbon bar containing most of the tools. In Excel 2003, it's a slightly different layout because of the old Excel interface, but all the same tools are available, and CAATTs is fully compatible with Excel 2003. So there's quite a wide range of tools, from data analysts, analytics tools, to tools that just make life easier in Excel and designed to help auditors out as they're carrying out sort of standard Excel tasks. Now, the first thing I want to show you today is one of our section modules, and these allow you to perform a wide variety of tests on a number of areas of the accounts all at once. So here I've got a list of invoices and transactions that make up the trade payables balance at the period end. And I'm going to run the trade payables listing section module. And this opens up a simple input form that we can now fill out to perform a number of tests all at once. So the first test we can do is re-age the ledger, and we can age that by due date, by invoice date, or by posting date. Obviously, this is dependent on the fields that we've got available to us. Now, you'll notice as I fill out this form, things change from red to green, or green to red, and that happens because there's a number of inbuilt error checking steps within CAATTs. So if you don't fill out a required input, or if you put invalid data like text in a numeric or a date field, then CAATTs won't actually let you continue, and if you try to, it will tell you to go back and check the red areas. So that's just one of the inbuilt error checking steps, and if you see anything red on the screen, it means I've not defined something yet. So here we can choose what type of aging we want to do, either using sort of standard 0 to 30, 31 to 60 aging bands, how many months old it is, what month the transaction or the invoice date occurs in, or we can set up custom bands as well. You'll notice the aging reference date has been pre-populated for me. You can store details about the engagements and projects that you work on within CAATTs, and you can store it, that stores information like the period end date, the client name or project name, materiality levels, and then the other CAATTs tools can use that information to save you having to keep entering it again and again. So that's why some of these fields have been pre-populated for me. We can look for duplicates, so duplicate invoice references. We can look for everything over a certain amount if we deem certain transactions to be significant. Again, that's been pre-populated with one of the materiality values from engagement details. Debit transactions will look for negative transactions. Invoices that don't have a purchase order, we can choose to only look at transactions over a certain value. If, say, you didn't need a purchase order for invoices below $500 or $1,000, then you could choose to ignore those transactions. And you can also choose to only look at certain transaction types. For example, in this case, we'd only expect to see purchase orders for invoices. We wouldn't expect to see them for unallocated payments or credit notes. Transactions posted on certain days of the week. This is a common fraud test. Often, if people are doing something suspicious, they may come into the office when there's no one around to catch them doing those things. So if there's transactions being posted on weekends that you wouldn't expect that to be happening, then that may be something you want to investigate further. Again, transactions posted on specific dates, for example, public holidays when the offices might be closed, and you wouldn't expect people to be in and posting transactions. So you can add the dates to look for here. You can also store a list of common dates. So I've got all of our public holidays here in the UK stored there, so I can easily recall those and look for any dates, any transactions posted on those dates. Another similar test is looking for transactions posted outside of normal working hours, so maybe between 8 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning, when you wouldn't, again, expect people to be in the office and posting transactions. Transactions around a specific date is really useful for cut-off testing, or where you suspect that there's actually been an issue. Maybe you've had temporary staff in for a week and you want to look at what's been going on around that week and see if anything suspicious has been going on with those transactions. So you can select any date you like. It's just it gets pre-populated with a period end, but you can change that to any date that you like. A transaction by user summary. This just creates a summary so you can see who's been posting the transactions, and you can choose to split this out. If, say, certain people were only authorized up to 5,000, then you could split that out so you can look at those differently. And rounded transactions is another common fraud test. Now, I just want to point out that although here we've got a list of transactions that make up the period end balance, you can also use these section modules to run on a list of transactions throughout the period. So that would include invoices that are closed and are no longer sat on the ledger. And that allows you to gain some insight into what's been going on over a period of time. And actually, you're not restricted to looking at a year. You could run 2 or 3 years worth of analysis through this all at once, provided you've got the input data. And for internal auditors, specifically looking at trade payables and just using the section module, you can uncover recovery savings and discover potential frauds that have been going on, or duplicate payments or duplicate invoices very, very quickly and easily, and that can lead to some significant cost savings that flow all the way through to the bottom line. Now, if you're an external auditor, this is an example of a new service that maybe you can offer and do that cost recovery work for some of your clients, maybe charging them a percentage of the recovery that you save them. So these tools aren't just related to year-end financial statement audits. You can apply the top CAATS tools and with any of the other CAATS packages to a wide variety of tasks, and it's almost like you've got a variety of tools and you need to understand where to then apply them rather than one tool for one specific situation. A lot of the tools can be used in a lot of different places. Okay, so after we've filled out the input form, we just click OK, and top CAATS will go off and it will do all of these analyses for us, and it creates a new workbook for us that contains a summary sheet. There's some header information that's again come through from our engagement that we've got defined. You can change the logo at the top left here to use any image file, so you can have your company logo there, or you can choose to just use plain text. We get a count of the number of records in the original report, which you can then check back to your original source data and check that top CAATS has analysed everything you're expecting it to. And we also get a total of the invoice amount, which can then, in this case, be agreed back to the trial balance to ensure that we are analysing the entire trade payables listing and we've not missed anything, or there's not another ledger that we need to include or consider. And then we get a list of the analysis that have been run. So we can see there were 788 duplicate transactions, there were 53 that didn't have a purchase order, there were a number of transactions posted on some public holidays, and you also get an input parameter screenshot. So this gets embedded into the output file, and you can see exactly what options were specified. And that can be used if you need to repeat a test for any reason. It performs a full audit trail, and it makes management review really easy because you can just visualize exactly what tests they've run. Now, any information that's not visible on the front of this is stored as a comment above, so the dates that we look for or the aging bands, those are stored as comments in the cells above. We get a copy of the source data, and this includes both the original fields and a number of additional fields that have been added by top CAATS to help it carry out its analysis. And then for each of the tests that we ran, there's a separate report, separate sheet containing the results. So here's our aging, and top CAATS makes extensive use of pivot tables because not only do they offer make things really easy to visualize, but they allow you to easily expand and enhance on the analysis. For example, a standard Excel feature is the ability to double-click and see the transactions. So if I want to see the transactions that make up this total of 1,609, I can just double-click this cell, and Excel creates a new sheet containing the transactions that make up that balance. Now, you might notice that the sheet has been renamed with information about the cell we clicked. That's actually a top CAATS feature. Normally, Excel just renames it sheet 5, sheet 6, or something like that. Top CAATS, if you've got top CAATS installed, it will intercept that and rename the sheet with something more useful for you. And another feature that we added to the pivot tables is the ability on the right-click menu to show detail on multiple cells at once, either creating separate sheets or also the same sheets. So for these 7 or 8 cells that I've got selected, I can create a drill down on all of those at once into one sheet. And those are just a couple of the examples where top CAATS integrates more with the core of Excel and adds some features just to make life a little bit easier, and tools that don't appear on the ribbon bar. So for each of the other tests that we ran, we can see we've got our over amount for the transactions greater than 10,000 there, our debit amounts, everything that's negative. those transactions that were posted on public holidays. Now, another thing I just want to point out about pivot tables, and this is a really good tip when you're using pivot tables or to use pivot tables when you're doing analysis, is it makes it really easy to enhance on the analysis that you've done. So CAATTs has created this basic pivot table for us, but we can enhance this just by simply dragging in new fields. So, for example, we could take the posted by field and drag it into the column labels area, and we can now see exactly who was in on these public holidays and posting those transactions, which we can then follow up if need be. So pivot tables are really good for enhancing and expanding on that analysis, and I would encourage you to use them. Okay, so that's just one of the section modules. There are 7 in total within CAATTs for looking at various different areas of the accounts. We've also got a variety of sampling routines. There's a full monetary unit sampling routine, stratified sampling, so if you want to split your data into different bands and then pick 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 items from each band, you can do that. And you can stratify either by a numeric amount or you can stratify by dates. So you could split it out into months and then pick 2 items from each month if you wanted to do that. And we've got random sampling and systematic sampling like you might expect. Now, the next tool I'm going to talk about is Join Two Sheets, and this is actually one of my favourite tools in the whole of CAATTs, and we get a lot of good feedback about it. And I talked earlier about VLOOKUP and how useful it is, and Join Two Sheets essentially supercharges what VLOOKUP can do and adds functionality, and it also simplifies it. Some people do find VLOOKUP a little bit complicated. It does take a bit of time to get used to sometimes, and Join Two Sheets simplifies that. And what it allows you to do is to join 2 different worksheets together based on a common matching column. So in this example, I've got a vendor master file and an employee master file, and I'm going to join them together by bank account number. And this will allow me to look for cases where an employee has possibly set up a fake vendor using their own bank details and is then going to use that to siphon money off into their own bank account. So we just select the worksheets that we're looking at, choose the matching column. We can then choose which fields we want to import in our output sheet, and this is one of the advantages of Join Two Sheets over VLOOKUP. With VLOOKUPs, you'd have to write a separate VLOOKUP formula to import each one of these columns. With Join Two Sheets, you can just choose which columns to import from tick boxes. And then there are some options about what we want to include in the output. So in this case, and for this test, we're only looking at cases where there is a match between the reports. So I'm going to untick that one, so we've just got rows that match between sheet 1 and sheet 2. And we can see here it's identified 3 cases where the bank account number agrees between both of those 2 reports, which we can then follow up on and investigate further. Now, another example of using Join Two Sheets is where you want to join information together from 2 different sources. So for example, here I've got a closing stock listing, so a list of all the inventory lines that we've got on hand at the period end. And I've also got a sales record summary by part number, so we can see how many of each part we sold, what the average sales price was, what our total sales value was. And for some testing, it may be useful to have information from both these reports in the same place. For example, if we're doing turnover analysis on a line-by-line basis, or if we're looking at net realizable value. And so we can join that information together using Join Two Sheets. Again, we just select the sheets that we want to join, and we're joining by part number this time. But this time, we want all of the records from the closing stock report, because that's what we're interested in here. We're looking at the closing stock, and we're trying to add some additional information from another report so that we can do more analysis. But just because a stock line hasn't been sold in the year, we still want to include in the output. So we'll include rows that don't match your record in sheet 2. And we can see, in this case, there is an example here where there was one of those records where we didn't have a sales record for it, so it couldn't be matched up. But for those other records, we've got information about sales now in the same place as our information about our closing stock, and we can do that additional analysis if we want to. Okay, I'm aware that time is coming on, and I do want to leave some time to some questions. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the other things that you can do. There is a standalone aging tool which has slightly more options than the one we saw in the section module a little while ago. There are a number of tools for summarizing your data in various different ways and spotting patterns within your data. Highlight changes is really useful for comparing two versions. So here I've got a set of accounts without tax and then an updated schedule where the tax charges have been put in, and we can use highlight changes to very quickly look for the differences between them. So our latest version is the account with tax, our previous version is the account without tax. We're going to highlight cells that have changed and I'll colour them red, and we're also going to add a comment to those cells that have changed so that we can see what the previous value was, and if they're numeric, what the difference is too. So that will create a new workbook for us that contains a summary with details about the different worksheets within each of the workbooks, including the number of differences found and details of any new or missing sheets. And then on each of the sheets we can see those differences have been marked up and coloured red, and we can see what the previous value was and what the difference is. So we can see actually there's been a movement in the warranty provision as well as the tax here, and if we weren't expecting that, maybe that's something we want to follow up on and investigate. Benefits testing is becoming quite popular at the moment for spotting unusual patterns and fraudulent data sets. Exception reporting, looking for records that match certain criteria, looking for specific comments and certain words or phrases, things like maybe miscellaneous or suspense or anything else that may indicate fraud or something you want to investigate further. Looking for gaps in numerical sequences, fairly common task, maybe used to look for gaps in check numbers or invoice numbers, purchase order numbers, things like that. Duplicate testing, again, fairly common task. Looking for outliers where transactions deviate significantly from the normal, and you can subgroup by a subcategory. So you could use that to look for cases where an invoice deviates significantly for the average for that supplier, or where payments deviate significantly for the average for that employee or for that department. Out of mask is pattern matching, and you can use that to look for things like bank numbers that don't match a predefined pattern, or tax IDs, or anything else that should follow a specified pattern. So there's a lot of sort of data analysis tools in there. There's also, over on the left here, a number of tools that just make life in Excel a bit easier. So there's things like manipulating text, removing leading and trailing spaces, and removing non-alpha numeric characters or unprintable characters, and just helping to tidy up some system-generated reports. Our fixed date tool is incredibly useful. One of the drawbacks of Excel is that often system reports will use date formats that Excel can't recognize, and that means that you can't use aging functions. You can't actually do any analysis based on the date because Excel doesn't recognize it as a date, it just sees it as text. So our fixed date tool will take one of those sort of columns and it will attempt to guess the mask, and it normally does a pretty good job of guessing the mask that's used. And you can see as I change through these columns, it's changing the mask that it's identifying. And it will convert those to dates that Excel can recognize, so that you can then use those in further analysis and use those dates going forward. Extract visible cells, that just takes what you can see on the screen. So if you've applied auto filters or you've hidden rows and columns, it will just take what you can see to a new sheet. Converting formulas to values, to be honest, I'm surprised Microsoft don't include this as a standard function. Quite often you'll apply a formula to a column to create a new column for some reason, and you'll then want to convert that column to its values because you're going to apply auto filters, or you're going to delete another column that those formulas were based on. So you just want to convert them to their formulas, and you can just highlight the selected cells and hit the button. As I've already mentioned, there's quite a lot of inbuilt error checking within CAATTs. So we've got the sheet checker, and that automatically will look at your source data when you run any of the tools. You can disable it if you want to, but if I try and run any of the tools now, it will run the sheet checker. And that will look for common errors, things like blank rows, blank columns, total rows, missing or duplicate headers, which causes problems with pivot tables. And so it will look for those sort of errors in your source data that just might cause CAATTs to have a problem using some of the other tools, or just doing other sorts of analysis in Excel might cause a problem with some of these errors. And not only will it identify these errors, it will have a very good job at fixing them. And you can see, just clicking one button there, I've got rid of all of those blank rows and columns. I've got rid of the total row that was at the bottom. The missing headers have been filled in so that pivot tables won't fall over when you try and use them. Again, duplicate headers have had a numerical suffix added to them. So that is a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of some of the sort of tasks you can carry out with data analysis software and some of the ways that CAATTs might be able to help you. Of course, it is very quick. We've only seen a tiny bit of what CAATTs can do. There are over 130 tools in total, and they're all designed to make your life easier and to help you in your day-to-day work. Now, if you would like to see more of what CAATTs can do, then you can request a fully functional 30-day trial at www.topcaats.com/auditnet. And during the trial, I've got a series of videos to help you get started and introduce you to the basics of using data analytics and using CAATTs. There is inbuilt help within CAATTs. There's a PDF user guide, and there's a whole series of video demos to help you get up and started. So I think you'll be able to pick it up and get started with that really quickly. Now, if you're not ready to look at dedicated CAATTs software yet, and you just want to get started with some of the basics in Excel, I promised you a copy of my book, The Ultimate Guide to Auditing with Excel. Now, this walks you through 101 audit tests that you can start using straight away using just Excel. So there really isn't any reason for you not to get started today. You can download a PDF copy of the book from www.auditingwithexcel.com/auditnet. And if you'd like a printed copy of my book, I'll be happy to send you one free of charge. I just asked you to cover the shipping and handling at $7.95, and there's details of how to order that on that webpage. Okay, that brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I really hope you found the information useful, and it's encouraged you to start using CAATTs in your audits, even if it's just downloading a copy of the book and running a few tests in Excel. We've now, I think, got time for some questions, so if you've not asked questions already, please feel free to ask them, and I'm just going to hand back over to Jim to moderate the questions.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. I think that you've provided a lot of information, a lot of great information that I think all those who attended are going to find very, very useful. We do have about 328 people in attendance today, so obviously we've got a number of questions here. We'll try to get to all the questions that I've received so far. However, if we can't get to your question, Charlie or I will make a best attempt to answer that question and get in touch with you. Let's start off with a question from Richard. And Richard says, you mentioned the VLOOKUP function several times. Recently, both Charlie Kidd of Excel User and Francis Hayes of Excel Addict have mentioned the index match function rather than using VLOOKUP. I haven't tried index match yet, but they claim is both faster and has less chance of error in setting up the search parameters. What is your experience?
Okay, I would agree with both Charlie and Francis on that. You can do more with index match. It can be certainly faster than VLOOKUP. Essentially, the way that it works is that you're using two functions there. The match function looks for a match, and that's exactly what it does, and it then returns the number within the array or within the range that you specified of where it's found that match. So if it finds the match on row 330, then it will return 330. You can then put that inside the index function, where you tell it to go 330 rows down and however many rows across you want. So it can do the same function. Because it involves two functions, there are a lot more inputs that you need to give it. So it can be more complicated. I would say using index match is more of an advanced Excel function. Using VLOOKUP, which isn't, you're right, it's not as good as index match, certainly in certain circumstances. But VLOOKUP is more of an intermediate Excel function.
Okay, very good. I will let everyone know, a lot of people did ask a question about getting copies of the PowerPoint slides. We will be providing a link within 24 hours that will provide a link to the recording as well as to the slides that Charlie has used. We opted not to provide the slides in advance, however, because much of Charlie's presentation, as you can see, was live screenshots, which obviously can't be captured in a PowerPoint slideshow. We have another question here for Richard, and I'll see if you can answer this one quickly because we've got a lot of questions coming in. Did not see a preset option in the Top CAATS entry screen to be able to choose transactions that fall in a value range that is just below the approval authorization threshold. Is there a function that allows either specifying a value range that is just below an approval limit or that allows choosing transactions within an amount range?
Sure. There are a couple of ways that we can look at that. The first is using benefits testing, which is used specifically for that. You would expect to see on the benefits first two-digit tests. Actually, might just have a demonstration of this, but benefits two-digit test will show spikes if you've got people posting just below authorization thresholds. So we scroll down to the results on that. You can see that's an example of a threshold just below either 500, 5,000, 50,000, or something like that. You'll see a peak there at 49. So benefits testing is one way that you can look at that, and that doesn't necessarily show you those transactions. You can then come back up to this pivot table and use the drill down function we saw earlier to look at those transactions. There is also stratification. So within the sampling, you can stratify, and we can stratify that by amount, and we could then choose to create custom size bands, and we could come in here and we could set bands from 0 to 4900, 4900 to 4999. And then 5,000 up to wherever, and wherever we were looking. So you could set that up doing that, and the stratification will create a pivot table as an output for us, which you can then drag another field in, like whoever was posting transactions, if you've got that as well, so you can see who is doing it. So yeah, you can use either benefits testing or stratification to look at that.
Very good, very good. Okay, we've got a question here from Kavan. Could Top CAATS be effectively used on a company that is not completely computerized?
Sure. Again, doing data analytics using any CAATS product is going to depend on the software that you've got, the data that you've got available to you. And if you've not got systems that are storing it electronically, it becomes a lot harder to analyze in this sort of manner. Again, so that will depend on what data that you've got available to you. If you've got data that's not in a great format, there are numerous things that you can do within Excel and using Excel functionality to clean up that data and import data and merge it all together so that you can do this sort of analysis. Again, that's going to depend on the data you've got, and if anyone's got any specific questions about their own data sources, then feel free to drop me an email after the webinar. Actually, I'll just there's my email address up there for anyone who wants to contact me directly, and we've got Jim's email on there as well.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions that are coming in. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all of them. One thing that people were interested in was the cost of the software. I don't know if you want to discuss that online, or you can handle some of these offline, Charlie.
The cost of software sort of does depend on certain circumstances, on sort of how many users you've got and what payment model you want. So if people have got questions about that, if they want to drop me an email, I'll be more than happy to get back to people. They just sort of let me know a little bit about their backgrounds and how they're going to be using it and the number of people that they've potentially got. I'm more than happy to answer those questions. Okay.
Richard asked if those who are new to Top CAATS, is there a training tutorial that comes with the software?
Sure. If you sign up for a trial, we actually have got some sort of basic training that gets you up and running with some of the basics to get you started. and you'll get that automatically when if you go to the website topcaats.com/auditnet and sign up for a trial. You'll get those videos that show you around and get you up and running and started. There is inbuilt help within TopCAATS, so all of the tools have got a little question mark in the top right corner that you can click, and that will bring up some topical help on what it is that you're looking at the moment. There's a PDF user guide that's got screenshots and goes into more detail. And then for people who decide to purchase TopCAATS and go forward, we have a variety of training options ranging from self-study courses to online training, using software just like this webinar, where we can do customized sessions just for people, for your company, and you can interact. We can see your screen, like you can see my screen now, and we can provide pointers. And we're also happy to travel and provide in-house training. So we've got quite a lot of options available there.
Okay, we've got a ton of questions as expected. I don't think that we're going to be able to get to all of them. Let me see if I can just find some. Do you know of this one comes from Wes, do you know of top software to import data from paper to Excel? I think I can probably answer that as well, Charlie. I think that anything that you have in paper format, you'd have to convert it into some sort of electronic file. There are programs like Monarch that can do some of these that take copies of reports, and then you could probably import that data into Excel. Do you know of any other?
Just something to add to that. We are starting to see that there are other products that I'm not affiliated with that will even take paper records, and you can run them through a scanner, and it will capture all the data for it and import it into a format that you can then export to Excel. So taking proper paper records. One of the things, just to be careful of that, and it's where this sort of software can be really useful, is just checking and running some analytics on what it's created to check that it's not made errors. If you are doing that sort of analysis, then it can be useful running some routines that are designed just to check the quality of the import of data as well.
Okay. This one comes from Giodi. Can someone with basic level Excel knowledge use TopCAATS?
Sure. It was, hopefully on the demonstration you got to see that it's fairly sort of click button and select from drop-down boxes. It was designed with the novice in use, and when we created it, it was designed to be as easy to use as possible. So the answer to that is I would say yes. Again, I would encourage people to see how they get on with the trial and see how they find it. And if they've got questions and they don't understand something, or they can't work out how to do a particular task and what tools to use, then I'm always happy to answer those sort of emails. I'm aware with the number of people we've got on this webinar, I might be getting a lot of emails and inquiries over the next week or two. So I'm just going to apologise in advance if I take a few hours to get back to people.
I think you will. We've probably got about 35 questions here, so obviously we aren't going to be able to get to all of them today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar that was brought to you by AuditNet and TopCAATS. Thanks to all who participated with great questions, and those that we couldn't get the questions answered. I will forward those to Charlie, and he'll do his best to get an answer out for you. Just a reminder, you're going to receive an evaluation form at the conclusion of this session. Please take a few moments to complete it when it arrives, as it will help us improve future webinars. Finally, please know that we're available to answer your questions after the webinar, and the contact information that was on the slide. If you didn't get that, don't worry. You're going to get a link to the slides that Charlie prepared for this, as well as the recording of the event. So please feel free to contact either Charlie or myself by email for any additional assistance. Charlie, thank you for being with us today, and I'm sure that everybody really appreciates the great information that you shared, and the look at TopCAATS, which I'm sure you'll be getting many requests from individuals for evaluation copies, and hopefully they will purchase the software from you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me today, Jim, and thank you everyone for your questions and for participating in the webinar today.
Great. Everybody have a great day. Take care.
Brilliant.